we have to fear is fear itself. Fear itself. Fear itself.
From the Center for History and New Media at George Mason University, this is Digital Campus, a bi-weekly discussion of how digital media and technology are affecting learning, teaching, and scholarship at colleges, universities, libraries, and museums.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. Fear itself.
This is Digital Campus number 35 for the 23rd of December, 2008. Year in Review. I'm Dan Cohen. Happy holidays from the entire Digital Campus crew, including me, Dan Cohen, and Tom Scheinfeld. Hi, Tom.
Hi, Dan.
And Mills Kelly. Hi, Mills.
Hi, Dan.
Hope everything's going okay on the pirate seas over there.
Everything's going very well here in the land of the pirates.
The land of the pirates. Maybe we'll have to talk about that at some point on a future podcast. But for those who are listening in real time, you might want to take a look at a story about Mills Kelly and his famed pirates on Chronicle's homepage, the Chronicle of Higher Ed's homepage. Well, it is the end of 2008, and as we've done every year, can we say that now that this is our second year? As we did last year at this time, we are going to do our year in review and the top 10 stories, as seen by the three of us at least, the top 10 stories in technology, the internet, new media, and of course education, academia, libraries, and museums. So it'll be a fun top 10 here, and we will climb the mountain up to number one. Of course, if you think we left out a story, please do comment at digitalcampus.tv on some technology and education stories that you thought were important. We'd love to continue the discussion online. So, Tom and Mills, it's been an exciting year here on the podcast, and a lot of things happening in technology and libraries, museums, and universities and colleges. Why don't we start with, speaking of universities and colleges, at number 10 we have a real expansion in open educational resources, and especially things like video and audio podcasts or YouTube videos of professors. Seems like a growing trend. I mean, even just this last week, the old ladies of British education, Oxford and Cambridge, started putting podcasts online, including luminaries like Joseph Stiglitz talking about the global credit crunch. Mills, you've been a big proponent. Indeed, you've podcasted yourself. Do you think this is going to expand in 2009? And how important was it in 2008?
Well, first of all, in terms of how important it was in 2008, I actually started, I think, in 2007 with a simple setup, just using my iPod and a little iMic plug-in and a little like $19 lavalier that I attached to my lapel, and I can create really simple and easy podcasts that I upload immediately, and so it's an incredibly simple process that some people would like to make really complicated, but and these are, perfectly good audio quality podcasts, and my students really, really appreciate it, because if they miss a class for some reason, or there was something in class they want to go back to, they don't have it in their notes, they can just go and download the podcast and listen to the lecture. They don't get the interaction that goes on in the classroom. They don't see any slides that I put up on the screen or anything like that, but they get the audio track for the class, at least of me. My mic doesn't pick up other people in the room very well. So it works great. And I think it's so simple and so easy to use now that and so appealing to students, especially at places like George Mason, where the students, they work for a living, they don't live on campus very much, or not very many of them live on campus, and so it's a great resource for them, and it's too easy not to do it in some ways.
And you haven't found your students abandoning the class wholesale?
No, because for one thing, I don't post up the podcast for every single class, only because I don't lecture all the time. I guess if I was lecturing every single class, then I might see that kind of abandonment. But, in a Monday, Wednesday, Friday class, I probably lecture on Monday and maybe every other Wednesday. And the rest of the time is discussion of readings and things like that. And that does not get podcast because you can't easily podcast a discussion, and so you can't easily record the discussion. So, they might abandon the lecture class some, but I haven't noticed any drop off in attendance.
Is this something that, I mean, it looks to me like just browsing through these Oxford and Cambridge podcasts tends to be the luminaries on campus. In a sense, it's PR for the university. I think we've discussed that before. The Yale podcasts, for instance, are, the really great teachers and very sexy course titles like The Philosophy of Death and these sorts of things. Is this something that, but on the other hand, there are universities, I believe like Berkeley, that are capturing the entirety of their faculty's lecturing, or will in the next couple of years, which is, I think, why we have to have it on our top 10 this year. Is this something that will spread more widely, or will be sort of balanced between PR versions of this and more comprehensive versions?
Oh, well, I think the less the more staid universities are going to take it slower, and I think we've seen that with Berkeley was an early in the Bay Area was an early adopter of this YouTube technology and this channel for reaching out to its constituencies. I think Oxford and Cambridge, it's taken those universities a little longer to come around to it, but I do think it's going to end up being once they get comfortable with it, it's going to end up being more and more widespread within the universities. And I think it's not just video, although I think video is where this has gotten the greatest head start and where we see the most activity. But I comes to mind other kinds of open resources from universities and collecting institutions. We saw a lot of activity on Flickr this year with Boston Public Library and New York Public Library joining the Flickr Commons, which is kind of the same idea. It's releasing content from the institution, branded content from the institution on one of these more open, more popular, more Web 2.0 kinds of media sharing services. So I think this is definitely a trend that's going to continue and has really, I think, entered the mainstream. While it was really new in 2007, in 2008, I think it's really entered the mainstream.
Well, speaking of entering the mainstream, at number 9, we have a story that probably some in our audience might not think is a story because we didn't hear a lot about it, but to us it sort of indicates a transformation of the views of this entity, and that's, of course, Wikipedia going mainstream. We didn't hear a lot of griping about Wikipedia, did we, in 2008?
Very little, very little. In fact, we looked back before we started the podcast today and noticed that our first podcast was Wikipedia Friend or Foe, and people just can't seem to work themselves up about it anymore. And so I think it really has, in many ways, made it into the mainstream.
I agree. We haven't heard much about it. And what we have heard about it is the kind of news that puts it in the mainstream. For instance, the Wikipedia was awarded a major grant from the Sloan Foundation, which is one of the kind of old school New York foundations that doesn't tend to fund these kinds of things unless they are in the mainstream. And so I think, Wikipedia has come into its own as a somewhat respectable academic resource. So I think definitely we're going to see more of that in the next year.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of grants to Wikipedia, just recently they received a very large grant to transform their interface so that it's more usable by newbies, by new editors of Wikipedia articles. And I think the idea is that as it's grown, surely there's a core of Wikipedians, 5 or 10,000 who really do most of the edits on the site, but that they want to get more people involved, the casual visitor who knows something to add to an article, and if you've never added to a wiki, it's a little bit intimidating, and so they're doing I think it's about a $900,000 project to work on the interface a little bit on MediaWiki, which is the underlying software that runs Wikipedia and a lot of other wiki sites, to just make it a lot easier to just drop in and do an edit, to register, to participate in Wikipedia. And to me, again, that's, I think, pretty indicative of it. I have to say, just personally, I find myself going to Wikipedia more and more, obviously taking some articles with a grain of salt, but for most things, it's a quick check of a topic. The Federal Reserve Board of Governors I looked up this morning because I didn't really know how it functioned that well, and Wikipedia was sort of the first place